Okay, I don't really need to get into much backstory about Phantasy Star 4, but for those of you guys who don't know what Phantasy Star 4 is, it's the fourth game in the Phantasy Star series that was released first on the Sega Master System. You know, the 8-bit console that kind of looks good today, but not really. Anyway, I want to get down to the case point with Phantasy Star 4. I will come out right now and say I prefer Phantasy Star 4 over Final Fantasy 7. It's just an opinion. However, I was beginning to play this game again for the commentary channel I'm a part of, and there were some things in this game I didn't really notice first time around. And first off, I want to get to the big important thing about this. Phantasy Star 4 is indeed canon to Phantasy Star 3 in certain elements. For instance, the character Ren is a recurring character from Phantasy Star 3 that was in Phantasy Star 4. And he pretty much has the same background, except for the transformation. But nevertheless, let's get back. Phantasy Star 4 has a few interesting gimmicks in the game. First off, I want to go into the very first thing that most people tend to forget about this game, is the religious symbolism in the game. In the beginning, the very first and main villain of the game is Zio. You know, he's kind of like Lassic from Phantasy Star 1, except with black hair, and not as, well, far more menacing than Lassic before him. Yeah, well, it seems in the game, while you can even go on and check other wikis for information, the ideal of religion is pretty upfront with him, believing in that there's a God in front of him, and he's one of those people, an extremist if you will, who if his God wants him dead, he'll be happy enough to die for him, and his God empowers him. This is a little form of symbolism, but in terms of religious beliefs, this actually goes in a little deeper. Since Phantasy Star 4 actually tackles another form of religion with another character, Raja, or as everybody likes to call him, one of the best things about the game that's actually part of the character selection. Raja is another religious character in the game, however, he actually comes in the second half of the game, prior to the 3/4 of the game. Raja is a comedian, to say at the very least. He's one of those religious figures who you can go up to, and he's really funny. One of the very first things that he actually comes up in the game was when you crash his temple on this planet of Dizolis. It's a temple via church. He kind of just bashes and makes fun of you about it and whatnot. But he seems to be one of the people who are actually up there with the Pope of his planet. But other leaders were jealous of him, and he got the boot from it. However, there were some other things going on about this time. The religious aspect of Phantasy Star 4 is actually there in the series, where there's this blue firelight, i.e., think of it as the tree that God was talking out of to Moses. And this light is ancient, strong enough to destroy any kind of darkness and or evil. It's a pretty interesting theory, since in turn there is a religious academy of it. The ideal of religion in Phantasy Star 4 really isn't discussed and or brought up to a lot of people for various reasons of this, and I can agree why. Because religious in video games is something that's not really hand-to-hand in, but Phantasy Star 4 finds a way to talk about it without really talking about it, unless you go back and play Dizolis all over again. And there's even more of a little, how can I put it, sense of respect in it, because the people of Dizolis have their own beliefs and in a god in this form of Lutz. If you play Phantasy Star 1, you know who Lutz is. If you haven't, well, Lutz is equivalent to their version of Jesus, if you will. And the character in this game, Rune, sorry, the brain fart happens when I'm trying to do these kind of things, he kind of is the incarnation of Lutz. And that's where he passes on the knowledge onto him, to the son before him. It's kind of a story of reincarnation of their own political beliefs, kind of like Buddhism, where they believe in reincarnation as well. It's a nice little interesting twist on Phantasy Star 4 that I really do wish that this was something that was expanded upon. And if you actually talk to some people in the temples, they do give you some more beliefs that they follow. It's actually really nice that a game universe seems to go into the ideal of religion in said video game. It's actually something that I really do wish that certain games will go into in greater respect. I'm not really much of someone who actually has a set form of religion. In fact, I really don't like to talk about religion in general, since when I do talk about my religious beliefs, it kind of turns head, because they look at my past and go, why would I believe in something like that? However, this also needs to go back to the religious forms that the main villain at first, Zio, represents, Dark Force. And one of the biggest points in religion is kind of proving that your god exists and doesn't exist. And this form, Dark Force, is the god, and he's kind of the devil, representing all the darkness and the hatred manifested from all life forms itself. Which is, in other words, yeah, he's Satan. He takes on the identity of someone who joins your team near the end of the game. However, going into this a little more, he's nothing more than a, how can I put it, an insignificant part of the game. You do fight Dark Force, but even then, Dark Force is something that represents evil, the hatred, the sin of humanity. You can't really get rid of him, you can only push him back, but no matter how far you push him back, he will still find a way to return. I.e., dark people who are evil. So you can say and respect the belief that Zio actually follows in. You can probably call them the satanics or atheists or whatever. There's no really proper way that you can actually identify both of the religious views of this game. It's actually really, really ironic that the main villain is someone who you can say worships the devil, but the other guy, two people who join your team in the game, follow a form of religion that's very, very similar to Buddhism in terms of reincarnation and belief, as well as the structure of temples. They are practically the Buddhists of the game. One of them is the traditional one, sort of, who makes jokes and makes a lot of dirty comments. I really wouldn't call that traditional, however, I will say that he's actually my second favorite character in the game, third right next to Demi, but we'll talk about Demi and the androids in another episode. However, when we're going to go back into this, I'm going to bring up one other thing. One of the last member to join your team, who actually isn't Dark Force, is a student of said religion. So, she's kind of a scholar. She knows what right and wrong is, however, she's goofy and nuts. She's the other member of the team who actually uses a useless weapon. The first one being Alice. I'm getting off topic again, aren't I? However, I just want to make this clear. The aspect of religion in Phantasy Star 4 is actually really, really emphasized on it. And it's actually really shocking to me how no one really goes back to play Phantasy Star 4 really acknowledges said religion in game. It's actually really breathtaking in my opinion, since whenever people talk about religion in said game, they either go to Christianity when they say it's evil and there's people going on saying, this isn't right, and or they're representing a religious perspective in the wrong light, which is, how can I put it, biased on both perspectives. However, I'm just saying this with different eyes. I'm looking at this with a clearly different perspective. The ideal of good and evil, Zio representing those who actually crave and love evil and prefer the hell life and destruction, against those who actually represent love and kindness and reincarnation and beliefs in a strong system and structure. There are things like this that actually do pave the way for good storytelling in a game. And the religious emphasis is actually really, really pressured in the second half of the game prior to the first half. And it's actually really breathtaking how not a lot of people go back playing Phantasy Star 4 actually acknowledge this. I know in past games, the aspect of religion really isn't brought up much, but considering this was 90s Sega, and they were able to get away with such subtle beliefs in terms of religion, it's, how can I put it? Different. There's also another aspect in Phantasy Star 4, kind of, how can I call it? Xenophobia. But we're going to cover that another time. This is Meta Talks with Phantasy Star 4. Religion.